Welcome to TM News. The U.S. is expected to keep 100,000 troops in Europe for foreseeable future. Officials say the U.S. is expected to keep 100,000 troops stationed in Europe for the foreseeable future unless Russia escalates and threatens Sweden and Finland or NATO members, according to multiple U.S. officials. The numbers could temporarily increase if NATO carries out more military exercises in the region, and the U.S. could add additional bases in Europe if the security environment changes, the officials added. The plans are being considered following Thursday's meeting of NATO's military chiefs in Brussels, the officials said. The military chiefs are making the recommendations to a NATO defense ministers meeting planned for June, and NATO leaders including President Joe Biden will meet in Madrid at the end of that month. The U.S. increased its overall force posture in Europe from about 60,000 troops before Russia's invasion of Ukraine to about 100,000 now, adding troops and military assets to countries along Europe's eastern flank to support NATO and to further deter Russia. The U.S. contributed thousands of troops to NATO's response force, which was activated for the first time in NATO's history earlier this spring. These recommendations are consistent with what top military leaders have been telling U.S. lawmakers. In April, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff Gen. Mark Milley told members of Congress he endorsed creating permanent U.S. bases in Eastern Europe as a response to Russia's attack on Ukraine. But Milley said he believed U.S. troops at those bases could be rotational. He said he didn't think the U.S. needed to permanently station troops at them to create an effective deterrent. NATO's military chiefs, including Gen. Todd Wolters, who serves as both commander of U.S. European Command and Supreme Allied Commander, Europe, participated in the meetings in Brussels as the war in Ukraine grinds on, nearing the 3-month mark since Russia's invasion began. The U.S. added thousands of troops in Europe on temporary rotations, deployed additional military assets to the eastern flank to support 8 new NATO battle groups, and sent billions of dollars in military assistance to Ukraine, alongside NATO allies. However, the Pentagon recently announced replacement troops for those temporary rotations, signaling the increased U.S. presence will be maintained for some time to come. The Pentagon announced that approximately 10,500 U.S. Army personnel would be deployed to Europe in the coming weeks and months to replace forces that are already there on May 13. As well as the larger NATO meetings, Gen. Milley also met military leaders from France, Germany, Italy, and the United Kingdom as well as Finland and Sweden this week, according to readouts from Joint Staff spokesperson COL Dave Butler. As Sweden and Finland are poised to join NATO, U.S. officials don't believe additional forces will be needed unless Russia suddenly poses a threat to the two Nordic countries. If Russia were to move weaponry or make serious threats to move weaponry closer, the force posture might have to be further reassessed, the officials said. Sweden and Finland have expressed concerns about their security in the interim period after they submitted their applications for membership, asking certain NATO allies for additional security support while the process plays out. Certain nations have agreed to provide additional support to the two countries, Admiral Robert Bauer, chair of the NATO Military Committee, said Thursday. Most NATO members have welcomed Finland and Sweden's application to join, but Turkey has raised objections. Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin met with Swedish Defense Minister Peter Hultqvist at the Pentagon Wednesday, a day before the NATO military chiefs meeting in Brussels. The secretary made it very clear that we have a comfort level with their military going back many years, and that at a staff level we'll be happy to have a discussion with them about security and capability needs that they might have to help assure them and to deter Russia should that be necessary, a senior defense official said of the meeting between Austin and Hultqvist Wednesday. The official said there would be continued staff-level discussions about what the needs of Sweden's might be and how the U.S. could help fulfill them, and that the U.S. has also engaged Finland in similar staff-level discussions. The request for additional security needs might not result in additional U.S. troops, the official added. As an example, the U.S. might engage in additional military exercises with Sweden or Finland, according to the official. A more permanent force posture change. NATO and US leaders have been hinting at a more permanent change in European force posture in response to Russia's ongoing invasion, with a possible announcement at the NATO summit in Madrid next month. It could solidify the 100,000 troop level for some time to come. In April, Austin told U.S. lawmakers that the war in Ukraine and Putin's actions will change the U.S. military footprint in Europe. This unlawful and unprovoked aggression by Putin has the effect of changing the security architecture in the region for some time to come, Austin said. We do expect that it will change our footprint. In terms of how much it changes the U.S. contribution, that's left to be seen. Secretary of State Antony Blinken and NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg both hinted at an announcement about a more permanent change in NATO's military posture, specifically in Eastern Europe, at the conclusion of the NATO informal foreign ministers' ministerial in Berlin, Germany on May 15. We also spent time here in Berlin laying the groundwork for next month's summit in Madrid, Blinken said during a press conference at the conclusion of the NATO informal meeting in Berlin. NATO is going to release its new strategic concept laying out how the alliance will sustain and strengthen transatlantic security in the face of President Putin's aggression as well as other emerging threats. And we'll look ahead to our continuing efforts to fortify our force posture on NATO's eastern flank. Stoltenberg said the alliance will make important decisions to reinforce NATO's deterrence and defense to reflect the new security reality in Europe, during the summit in Madrid next month after the conclusion of the informal meeting in Berlin on May 15. Russian missile destroys cultural building in Ukrainian city of Lozova, injuring 7. President's office says a Russian missile destroyed the House of Culture in the Ukrainian city of Lozova on Friday, injuring 7 people, including an 11-year-old child, according to Ukraine's Office of the President. CNN has geolocated and verified the authenticity of the video, which was shared on Telegram by the president's office. Lozova is located roughly 45 miles southwest of Izium, a Russian-occupied city in the Kharkiv region. The missile was seen in the video milliseconds before it destroyed the building. When the missile hit the building, there was a large flash and a smoke plume as it exploded. The president's office claimed that the building had been newly renovated. CNN could not independently confirm the injuries that the office said resulted from the missile strike. Vatican City Foreign Minister reaffirms Vatican's offer to assist in negotiations between Kiev and Moscow. Archbishop Paul, the Foreign Minister of Vatican City, reaffirmed the Vatican's willingness to aid a genuine negotiation process between Ukraine and Russia in a speech in Kiev on Friday. Speaking alongside Ukrainian Foreign Minister Dmytro Kuleba, Archbishop Paul said negotiations were a just route to a fair and permanent resolution to the war in Ukraine. Lamenting the limitations of previous attempts at finding a resolution through negotiations, the Archbishop said, "Faith in God and in humanity compels us to persevere in the pursuit of peace through prayer, words, and deeds, and not to succumb easily to the enormous challenges. I assure you that both the Holy Father and his closest collaborators, including myself, suffer greatly from the many deaths, violence of all sorts, the devastation of cities and infrastructure, the separation of so many families, and the millions of displaced people and refugees," he added. Pope Francis has repeatedly made appeals for peace. The Vatican previously said it is willing to do everything possible to assist in reaching a ceasefire and brokering an end to the war in Ukraine. Archbishop Paul said the visit to Kiev, at the invitation of Kuleba, had been planned for quite some time, but obstacles, including health concerns with the COVID-19 pandemic, had prevented it until now. Germany will deliver first 15 anti-aircraft tanks to Ukraine in July. Defense Ministry spokesperson says Germany will deliver the first 15 Gepard anti-aircraft tanks to Ukraine in July, a German Defense Ministry spokesperson confirmed Friday, adding that the tanks should be fully operational in Ukraine by mid-July. At the end of April, Germany agreed to deliver anti-aircraft tanks to Ukraine. And in early May, Berlin said it will supply Kiev with 7 self-propelled howitzers. Last week, Ukrainian Foreign Minister Dmytro Kuleba welcomed Germany's announcement, saying that Berlin has now moved into the right direction following tensions between Kiev and Berlin. Over the past months, the German government has come under pressure from Ukraine and politicians at home for not doing more in providing heavy military equipment to help Ukraine defend itself against Russian attacks. Germany signs energy partnership with Qatar to distance itself from Russian gas. Germany and Qatar on Friday agreed on an energy partnership, which may see Doha start supplying liquefied natural gas to Berlin in 2024. Qatar will become key to Germany's future energy strategy to diversify away from Russian gas, German Chancellor Olaf Scholz said, addressing a joint press conference with Qatari Emir Sheikh Tamim bin Hamad Al Thani in Berlin. The energy security issue plays an important role for us. Germany will develop its infrastructure to be in a position to import liquefied gas by ship, Scholz said. It's a big step, and Qatar plays an important role in our strategy, the German leader added. The Qatari emir told journalists at the news conference that he hopes his country will commence to supply liquefied natural gas to Germany in 2024. Some background: Germany has been under pressure from Ukraine and other nations in Europe to make progress in weaning itself off Russian energy supplies since the start of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Earlier this month, Germany started construction works for its first floating LNG terminal in Wilhelmshaven, a city and port located in Lower Saxony in northwestern Germany. France announces its first medical evacuation flight for wounded Ukrainians and child cancer patients. France announced on Friday that it launched its first medical evacuation flight from Poland for wounded Ukrainians and child cancer patients. In a statement, the French Foreign Ministry said the flight today evacuated 7 Ukrainians wounded in the war, plus 3 Ukrainian children with cancer and their caregivers. The patients will be treated at the expense of France in various hospitals across the country, according to the statement. France remains committed to supporting Ukraine and the populations affected by the consequences of the Russian aggression, the ministry said. G7 pledges nearly $20 billion to support Ukraine's finances during Russian invasion. The finance ministers of Group of 7 nations have pledged $19.8 billion to support Ukraine's finances during Russia's invasion, a statement from the group said on Friday. In the statement, the G7, an organization of leaders from some of the world's largest economies, Canada, France, Germany, Italy, Japan, the United Kingdom and the US, said the funds will be used to help Ukraine close its financing gap and continue ensuring the delivery of basic services to the Ukrainian people. While also addressing Ukraine's humanitarian and other material needs, we recognize, in particular, Ukraine's urgent short-term financing needs, the statement said, adding that the proposed fund of $19.8 billion is, in addition to recent announcements on further military and humanitarian support. We will continue to stand by Ukraine throughout this war and beyond and are prepared to do more as needed, the group said. Missile strike on cultural center, Evil, Zelensky. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has condemned a missile strike against a cultural center in the Kharkiv region, describing the attack as absolute evil, absolute stupidity. Zelensky posted a dramatic video of the moment missiles hit the newly renovated House of Culture in Lazova on his Telegram channel, saying Russian forces were behind the attack. The president said 7 people were injured in the attack, including an 11-year-old child. He said, "The occupiers have identified culture, education, and humanity as their enemies. What is in the heads of people who choose such targets?" Putin calls for action to defend Russia against cyber attacks. Russian President Vladimir Putin has called for action to improve his country's resistance to cyber attacks, saying Russia had been hit by numerous incidents since Moscow sent troops to Ukraine. "We were generally ready for this attack," he said during a meeting of Russia's Security Council. "This is the result of the system-wide work that has been undertaken in the past few years. The attacks were coming from different countries, but were clearly coordinated," he added, and targeted Russia's critical information infrastructure, including the media, financial institutions, and government portal. Protection against such attacks could be achieved by hardening sensitive state and industry facilities, and through avoiding the use of foreign technology, among other things, he added. Canada slaps new sanctions on Russia. Canada has said it is imposing additional sanctions on Russian oligarchs and banning the export and import of targeted luxury goods to and from Russia. The new measures will put restrictions on 14 individuals, including Russian oligarchs, their family members, and close associates of Russian President Vladimir Putin, it said in an official statement. These individuals have directly enabled Vladimir Putin's senseless war in Ukraine and bear responsibility for the pain and suffering of the people of Ukraine, it said. The import ban will target Russian goods including alcoholic beverages, seafood, fish, and non-industrial diamonds, while the export ban will target luxury goods such as footwear, luxury clothing, and jewelry. Russia mulls recruiting soldiers over 40 years old as it struggles in Ukraine in a sign of Russia's urgent need to bolster its war effort in Ukraine. Parliament said on Friday it would consider a bill to allow Russians over 40 and foreigners over 30 to sign up for the military. The website of the State Duma, Parliament's lower house, said the move would enable the military to utilize the skills of older professionals. For the use of high-precision weapons, the operation of weapons and military equipment, highly professional specialists are needed. Experience shows that they become such by the age of 40, 45, it said. Currently, only Russians aged 18 to 40 and foreigners aged 18 to 30 can enter into a first contract with the military. Russia has suffered huge setbacks and heavy losses of men and equipment in the 86-day-old war, in which Ukraine has mobilized practically its entire adult male population. Despite taking full control of the ruins of Mariupol, Moscow remains far from its objective of seizing all of the Donbas region of eastern Ukraine. Clearly, the Russians are in trouble. This is the latest attempt to address manpower shortages without alarming their own population. But it is growing increasingly difficult for the Kremlin to disguise their failures in Ukraine, said retired U.S. General Ben Hodges, a former commander of U.S. Army forces in Europe. Jack Watling, a land warfare specialist at the British security and defense think tank RUSI, said the Russian military was running short of infantry. Russia needs to stabilize manning in its military units in Ukraine and generate new units if it is to improve its position on the ground, he said. This will be a slow and complicated process, but can be accelerated by mobilizing people with existing skills and military experience. The Duma said the proposed legislation would also make it easier to recruit civilian medics, engineers, and operations and communications specialists. Separately, Russian Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu said on Friday that Russia was forming 12 military units in its western military district in response to rising threats there, citing NATO membership bids by Finland and Sweden. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said Donbas is completely destroyed and accused Russia of a deliberate and criminal attempt to kill as many Ukrainians as possible after a village in Chernihiv was hit with missiles, leaving many dead. Russia claims almost 2,000 Ukrainian soldiers have surrendered at the Azovstal steel plant in Mariupol, which became a symbol of Ukrainian resistance in an otherwise Russian-occupied city. CNN is unable to verify this tally, but the evacuation of Azovstal is ongoing. The U.S. Senate approved a $40 billion emergency aid package to Ukraine, which President Joe Biden will sign while he is in South Korea. The war crimes trial of a 21-year-old Russian soldier who pleaded guilty to killing an unarmed Ukrainian civilian has been adjourned until Monday. German ambassador, Ukraine war pulverized Germany's assumptions on engaging Russia. German ambassador to the U.S. Emily Haber said that a strategy of interdependence when engaging Russia has now been pulverized by the invasion of Ukraine and resulting fallout. When asked by CNN's Jim Sciutto whether Germany fundamentally misread Vladimir Putin in past years, here's how Haber responded: "It is true that for many decades our strategy rested on the fundamental assumption that interdependence would produce stability, predictability, and to some extent of a time, even alignment. It was, if you will, our experience with regard to the GDR and with reunification and even with regard with the implosion of the Soviet Empire. We now do see that interdependence can actually also produce vulnerability. So this assumption, in effect, has been pulverized." Haber also reiterated that the West needs to be united in its messaging against Russian President Vladimir Putin, because we know, in effect, probably very little about the inner dynamics of his circle. Haber also discussed Germany reducing dependence on Russian energy, saying that the country is working at breakneck speed, and the result will be irreversible. We have to reduce our dependence on Russian fossil fuels as quickly as we possibly can. We are now discussing an oil embargo. And Germany is actually pressing for it. There are other options on the table as well, but all of them designed to make sure we are getting out of that dependence. Gas is a more complicated story because, other than the oil market, it's not a global market. But we are diversifying. Germany is at breakneck speed. We are ordering big contracts of LNG, we are building LNG facility storage. And our intention is to get out of Russian gas, let alone oil and coal, as quickly as we possibly can. We need to end that dependence, and it will be irreversible, she said. Germany and Qatar on Friday agreed on an energy partnership that may see Doha start supplying liquefied natural gas to Berlin in 2024. Earlier this month, Germany started construction works for its first floating LNG terminal in Wilhelmshaven, a city and port located in Lower Saxony in northwestern Germany. Ukraine aid bill is being carried by someone who was already traveling to South Korea. The $40 billion Ukraine aid bill is being flown to South Korea for U.S. President Joe Biden's signature, a National Security Council spokesperson confirmed to CNN. The bill is being carried by someone who was already traveling to the region as part of their official duties, the spokesperson said. The bill is being flown to South Korea for the president to sign, and it's being carried by someone who was already traveling to the region as part of their official duties, the spokesperson said. The legislation provides money for military and humanitarian aid, including funding to assist Ukrainian military and national security forces, help replenish U.S. equipment sent to Ukraine, and provide public health and medical support for Ukrainian refugees. Level 10 alarm over global food crisis. U.S. envoy to UN. U.S. ambassador to the UN, Linda Thomas-Greenfield, said she is at level 10 of alarm over Russia's blockade of Ukraine's ports and its impact on global food supplies. I can tell you on a scale of 1 to 10, I'm probably at the 10 level of alarm. This crisis has exacerbated what is already a serious food insecurity issue, she told BBC's NewsHour program. The Ukraine war and Russia's aggression in Ukraine, its blockade of the ports, blocking Ukrainian wheat from getting to the market, has exacerbated this situation and made it even more dire, and the impact is being felt across the world. On the issue of the blockade, and the fact that Ukrainian mines are also present in the waters along the Black Sea coast along with Russian ships, she said she believed the issue of mines was also being discussed by UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres as part of his efforts to persuade both parties to allow supplies in and out. I understand this is part of the discussions that the Secretary-General is having currently, and part of that is to figure out how to remove those mines and open up a humanitarian corridor that will allow ships to go to the ports in the Black Sea, she said. Azovstal families worried over fighters' fate. The fighters were left with no option. After weeks holed up in Mariupol's Azovstal steelworks, they were ordered to surrender. Hundreds are now in Russian hands. Their fate remains unknown. For their families, it's been an anxious wait. They hope the fighters will return soon in a prisoner swap, as suggested by Ukrainian authorities. But it's not clear when, or if, that will happen. Ksenia, whose husband was at the plant, told me she hadn't received any information about where he was, but that she believed he was among the fighters taken to Russian-controlled territory. There's been no list of who has been evacuated. We're very concerned because the country has shown that they don't follow the rules, she said, referring to Russia. We really hope that the task of saving their lives will be completed. Natalia, sister of a fighter, said the only information she had received came from the videos posted by some of the commanders online. There's been no official information, she said. We hope there'll be an agreement for their Russia says the fighters will be treated in line with international norms. And the Red Cross says it has registered hundreds of prisoners of war who surrendered at Azovstal, without giving details. An unknown number of combatants remain inside the plant. What will happen to them is also not clear. Russia to cut Finland off from gas supply for failing to pay in rubles. Russia's Gazprom has informed Finland it will halt flows of natural gas from Saturday morning, Gazprom said on Friday, after the Finnish state-owned gas wholesaler refused to pay its Russian supplier in rubles. Gazprom Export has demanded that European countries pay for Russian gas supplies in rubles because of sanctions imposed over Moscow's invasion of Ukraine. Most supply contracts are denominated in euros or dollars, and Moscow has already cut off gas to Bulgaria and Poland last month after they refused to comply with the new payment terms. The majority of gas used in Finland comes from Russia, but gas only accounts for about 5% of its annual energy consumption. It is highly regrettable that natural gas supplies under our supply contract will now be halted, Gazprom chief executive Mikko Wieljanen said in a statement. However, we have been carefully preparing for this situation, and provided that there will be no disruptions in the gas transmission network, we will be able to supply all our customers with gas in the coming months, he said. The cutoff is scheduled for 4 o'clock GMT on May 21st. Gazprom, which had warned on Wednesday that Russian supplies could be cut, said it would continue to supply gas to Finnish customers from other sources through the Baltic Connector pipeline connecting Finland with Estonia. Finland said on Friday it had agreed to charter a storage and regasification vessel from U.S. based Accelerate Energy to help replace Russian supplies, starting in the fourth quarter this year. The vessel turns supercooled, liquefied natural gas that can be shipped back into gas. Gazprom Export, the exporting arm of Gazprom, confirmed on Friday it would suspend gas sales for Gazprom starting from Saturday. Gazprom Export said this was because Gazprom had not paid it for gas delivered in April under new Russian rules requiring settlement in rubles. It also said it would defend its interests in arbitration proceedings. Prior to the Gazprom announcement, Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov said on Friday Moscow did not have detailed information regarding Gazprom's supply contracts. But obviously nothing will be supplied to anyone for free, he said. The prospect of losing most of the gas supply has prompted Finnish industry majors like Neste, Metsä, and others to seek alternative energy sources or make contingency plans to adapt their production. Forestry group Stora Enso has said it had already replaced Russian natural gas with liquefied natural gas at all its units. Its peer UPM said it uses gas delivered via the Baltic Connector pipeline from Western providers but is nevertheless preparing for the possibility of short-term disruptions. 12 civilians killed in Russian bombardment of city in Luhansk. Ukrainian military says Ukrainian military officials say 12 people were killed in the eastern Luhansk region and 60 properties destroyed by Russian bombardments on Thursday. But, they note, Russian forces do not appear to have made any headway on the main front lines in Luhansk and Donetsk in the past day. Civilian deaths: the 12 people were killed in the city of Severodonetsk, according to the head of the military administration in Luhansk, Surai Haidai. Haidai said many homes were destroyed throughout the area. Lines holding: despite the intense bombardment, the Ukrainians say their defensive lines are holding. The assault on Severodonetsk was unsuccessful. The Russians suffered personnel losses and retreated, Haidai said. State of the city: Oleksandr Stryuk, head of the Severodonetsk City Military Administration, said there are up to 15,000 civilians still in the city, living in bomb shelters and basements. The city has been without electricity, internet, and communication for almost a week now, he said. About 70% of the city's housing stock was destroyed. Russians push on. South of Severodonetsk, Russian forces tried to break through around the town of Tishkivka, according to the Ukrainian General Staff. In their efforts to complete the seizure of Luhansk, the Russians have also tried to push toward the small town of Vyskriva. If successful, they would also be closer to another objective, the town of Bakhmut in Donetsk, which has become a hub for the Ukrainian military as it tries to resupply its defensive positions. On the Donetsk front, there was continued shelling of settlements north of Sloviansk. Further north in the Kharkiv region, where Ukrainian forces have launched a counteroffensive in recent weeks, Russian shelling of areas retaken by Ukrainian forces continues, according to the Ukrainian military. The city itself has seen much less incoming fire. Dauphin, Parkland region set to welcome Ukrainian refugees with a plane full of 300 Ukrainian refugees fleeing violence in their home country scheduled to land in Winnipeg on Monday. Communities across Manitoba are preparing to welcome newcomer families seeking a safe life in Manitoba. In Dauphin, which has a significant Ukrainian population already, community donations have led to the creation of the Parkland Ukrainian Family Fund for refugees looking to start a new life in the Parkland region. When the war started, we couldn't really believe it would actually happen, Dauphin's Don Tarrant told 680 CJOB's The Start. We thought about, what could we really do? The devastation was massive, and there's people that are going to have to leave the country. So from there, we thought, Dauphin and the Parkland area is a very good place for people to settle. The culture is very strong here, sort of like home. Right now, we have 4 families that we've settled in and another 7 or 8 families we've accepted, and they're all in various stages of coming over. Dauphin resident Stephen Jadek said support for the refugees has been strong in the region since the war began. Everybody was hoping that the war would maybe end quickly, and that doesn't seem to be happening, so it's really all hands on deck trying to support Ukrainians. We want them to feel the warmth and acceptance that we have for them in our area. Jadek said some folks who've already come here from Ukraine were pleasantly surprised to see some Dauphin residents speaking fluently in their own language. Some of them, their English is quite good, but when start to talk to them in Ukrainian, I believe right away they're more comfortable, more relaxed. Earlier this month, Manitoba Premier Heather Stefanson said officials have confirmed a federally arranged chartered plane will land in Winnipeg on May 23.